Time, I call the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak on the Appropriations Bill this morning, and there are three things that I'd like to outline in the time which I have available. Firstly, I'd like to outline the rationale for the budget and what we are hoping to achieve through the decisions which the government has made. Secondly, I'd like to address some particular concerns raised in the community. And thirdly, I'd like to outline some of the initiatives that specifically impact on my electorate of Aston. Let me start, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the budget rationale. This, as everybody knows, was a tough budget. We acknowledge that. We've had to reduce some expenditures. We've had to initiate a debt levy on high income earners. And we realise that some of these measures are not popular. But the government has done these things for a reason. And the reason is that the public finances are in an absolute mess due to the decisions of the former government. We are simply spending beyond our means, and this is simply not sustainable. This budget is about restoring our finances because we cannot have a strong, prosperous economy without a strong budget. Let me outline the figures to illustrate how unsustainable the financial position was before this budget. Firstly, having gone from $20 billion of surpluses in 2007, Labor ran up the six biggest budget deficits in Australian political history, totalling $191 billion. Second, their forecasts were for a further $123 billion in deficits over the next 4 years. What this meant is that the aggregate debt was to grow to $667 billion. To put that into what that means for each individual, that's about $25,000 for every single man, woman and child in this country. The interest alone today, Madam Deputy Speaker, is about $1 billion a month to pay for our present debt. Now, $1 billion represents the cost of a public hospital. So without this interest bill, we could build 12 public hospitals this year. But we can't because we're spending $1 billion per month. We are simply spending way more than we are earning, and as every householder knows, you just cannot do that indefinitely. The Coalition did not create this fiscal mess, but we accept the responsibility to fix it. And this budget brings the finances back under control. It eliminates almost $300 billion worth of debt. It reduces the deficits by $44 billion over the next 4 years, which is the budget period. And it shows a pathway back to surplus, having reduced the deficit in 2017, the final year of the budget estimates, from $18 billion down to $3 billion. There are tough decisions to get to this particular position, and I acknowledge that, and I wish we didn't have to make those tough decisions. But we would be abrogating our responsibility as a national government if we did not take action now. We were elected to fix up the financial mess left by the former Labor government, and we are doing exactly that through this budget. Now, if I could move, Madam Speaker, to address some particular concerns raised in the community. The first one is the allegation that we have made substantial cuts to hospitals and to schools. I'd like to clarify that by pointing out exactly what we are doing over the 4-year budget period. Firstly, in relation to hospitals. Far from making cuts to hospitals, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are increasing hospital expenditure to record levels. Next year, we'll increase hospital expenditure by 9%. The year after, by a further 9%. The year after that, by a further 9%. And in the final year of the budget 4-year period, we'll increase hospital expenditure by 6%. When I look at schools, again, we are increasing school funding to record levels. Next year, we'll increase school funding by 8%. The following year by a further 8%. The year after that by a further 8%. And the year after that by a further 6%. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are very substantial increases in funding to hospitals and schools, and it is simply wrong for Labor to allege that we have cut funding to hospitals and schools and placing fear in the community that they believe, and leading them to believe, that hospital beds will be closed or there'll be fewer teachers next year as a result of this budget. It is simply incorrect. We are increasing funding to hospitals and schools by record levels. Similarly, in relation to pensions, let me be very clear. There are no cuts to pensions in this budget. The pension will continue to increase every 6 months. It increased in March. It will increase further in September. It will increase again the following March and the following September, and so on. Every single pension supplement will continue as it has done previously to this point in time. The only two decisions which have been made in relation to the pension are firstly to increase the eligibility of the pension age to being 70 years of age by 2035. Now, of course, by that period of time, nearly every single person who is 70 by the time of 2035 will have been earning superannuation for most of their career. And superannuation is accessible presently at the age of 60. The second decision we have made is to ensure that pensions are indexed according to the CPI from 2017. Now, this means that the pension will continue to increase in real terms from 2017 according to the CPI. So we have not cut pensions, as the Labor Party would make you believe. In fact, they will increase every 6 months, as they have always done, and would have just made those two changes that I have mentioned. In relation to universities, Madam Speaker, there are some very substantial reforms in this budget. We have deregulated the university system to enable our universities to flourish, to enable them to be world-class. This will mean, in some cases, that some university fees will go up, but in other cases, university fees will stay as they are, and in further cases, they in fact may come down. Importantly though, Madam Deputy Speaker, there will be no upfront fees. Even if fees do go up somewhat, they will still be part of the overall HEX scheme, which means there's no upfront payment and every payment is only made once the person has graduated and is earning more than $50,000 in salary. In addition to that, though, there are some very substantial measures which will particularly benefit low SES students. In particular, I mentioned that for the first time, HEX will be available for sub-degrees, for associate degrees and for diplomas. HEX will also, for the first time, be available for private higher education providers. Now, the combination of those two measures means that there will be an additional 80,000 university opportunities for students across this nation. And predominantly, those opportunities will be taken up by families who typically may have not had a university graduate before, because sometimes a diploma is a pathway through to going on to a higher degree. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me just touch on the Medicare co-payment. The government is asking Australians to pay $7 when they go to a doctor in order to try to make Medicare sustainable. Expenditure on Medicare is growing exponentially, a growth which is simply not sustainable. The Medicare levy covers less than 20% of health costs. So that is not necessarily a mechanism to ensure the sustainability of Medicare overall. And Madam Deputy Speaker, the $7 co-payment is similar to the co-payment that Labor introduced for the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. Labor introduced that co-payment for precisely the reasons that this government is advocating the co-payment for Medicare, and that is to make the system sustainable over the longer term. We want to see it sustainable. We want to see Medicare be a central part of our system. Importantly, with this co-payment measures, there is a safety net which covers about 40% of all Australians. Everybody with a concessional card and all children under the age of 16 would only have to pay a maximum of $70 in any one calendar year. Further, a doctor will still have discretion if a particular individual has financial hardship to waive that $7 fee. Madam Deputy Speaker, the overall aim is to ensure that there is a proper safety net, but to see that the Medicare system as we know it today is sustainable well into the future. Let me finally conclude by mentioning some of the measures in the budget which are specifically targeted at my electorate. Firstly, there are some community safety measures which I've announced locally already. These were election commitments which I made, and I'm very pleased to see that they are being delivered in my electorate over the course of the 2014-15 financial year. It includes security cameras for 3 shopping strips. It includes better lighting at Scoresby Village and Alchester Village, and includes some mobile security cameras for the Knox Police. There is also some local infrastructure funding to support the upgrade of some of the local community sports facilities. Now, that is so important because we want to have as many young people participating in sport or other community activities as possible. Because if young people are participating in these activities, then it keeps them busy and it keeps them off the street. And importantly, the large sporting clubs are also places where young people can get mentored by older people. So I think that these funds towards sporting infrastructure is a benefit not just to the people directly using that community infrastructure, but indeed to the entire community. And of course there was additional funding for the East-West Link, a further $1.5 billion, bringing the total federal contribution to $3 billion for the East-West Link, and that will have enormous benefit for residents of my electorate in Aston to ensure that they can get into the city and across the city more quickly. There are a number of other measures that I will continue to fight for. There are important roads such as the extension of Police Road to be extended to take the pressure off Bergens Road. I'm going to continue to fight for improvements to Napoleon Road. I will continue to fight to improve the Baronia Heights Primary School, which is in need of an upgrade. I will continue to support and fight for the upgrade to the Bayswater CFA. And of course, I will never stop fighting for the Rowville Rail, which is long overdue. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me conclude by saying that, yes, this was a tough budget. I acknowledge that, and in the ideal world, we would not have to have delivered a tough budget. We would not have had to make some expenditure cuts, and we would not have to have had put in place measures such as the debt levy on high-income earners. But the simple fact is that the budget position was unsustainable, that we were spending as a nation far more than we were raising in revenues, and that position was unsustainable. You simply cannot continue to spend more than you raise, otherwise you get into a situation like Greece or Spain or Italy, and we certainly do not want to be going down that path. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a tough budget, but it is ultimately necessary for the public finances to be restored to a healthy position, and overall is good for the nation.